Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, welcome. This is TV Courtroom, hosted by yours truly, Attorney Michael Coy. We're going to have a wonderful show today. The first part is going to be an introduction to you of, and you know, I've been doing this for about 30 years, and this being criminal defense, and even some civil cases every now and then, but primarily criminal defense. Been doing this for about 30 years. And obviously, there have been elections throughout those 30 years, many of them judicial elections for municipal court, for court of common pleas, for retention. And I got to tell you, in my 30 years of being a trial lawyer, I have never been as impressed with a judicial candidate as I am with the one that you're going to hear from in about 4 or 5 minutes. You might say, well, why are you so excited? It's very simple. Judges are more, quote unquote, important than mayors, than governors, than even the president of the United States. You might say, well, how can you say that? Very easily. This is how I say that. This is why I say that. Unlike the mayor, unlike the governor, and unlike the president, a judge has 4 awesome powers. When I say awesome, I mean overwhelmingly powerful powers. What are those 4 powers that mayors and that governors and that presidents don't have? 1, a judge can take away your property by imposing a fine. Mayors can't do that. Governors can't do that. Presidents can't do that. Judges can also take away your liberty by throwing you in jail. Can't say that about mayors and governors and presidents. Number 3, judges can take away your children through custody orders. Can't imagine anything worse than your children being taken away from you. Well, judges have that power. And finally, judges, unlike mayors and governors and presidents, judges can take away your life through the imposition of the death penalty. So don't get me wrong, all electoral positions are important, from city council to the sheriff, to the DA, to the state legislature, to the register of wills, to the city commissioners. All those positions are important, but there's none more important than the judge. Now here in Philadelphia, you have 2 levels. We have municipal court, and we also have the Court of Common Pleas. We'll talk more about those in just a few minutes when we hear from our guest. In addition to the municipal court and the Court of Common Pleas in Philadelphia, above that you have Superior Court. And I guess adjacent to that is the Commonwealth Court. We'll talk about that. And then at the top, the State Supreme Court. And those judges in those courts have awesome powers. So you want the right person to be in a position as a judge. Well, Samantha J. Williams is that person. I know because I interviewed her. I wrote an article about her in the Philadelphia Tribune. And by the way, if you want to know all the details about this wonderful candidate for judge, just Google phillytrib.com, type in CORD, C-O-A-R-D, and then type in Samantha J. Williams. And you'll be able to read exactly who this person is and why I'm so hyped about it. And as you see from our producer, Roland, he has it right up there, phillytrib.com. Just go to that website, PHILLYTRIB, phillytrib.com. Type in, when you get to the website, CORD, C-O-A-R-D, and type in Samantha J. Williams. And you'll find somebody who's eminently qualified, pre-eminently qualified. Don't just take my word for it. Go ahead, read my article, but don't just take the article's word for it. I also want you to listen as I ask her the following questions in about 2 minutes, 1 minute when we get her on. I'm going to ask her, what is it that a Court of Common Pleas judge does? What's the responsibility? Number 2, I'm going to ask her, why do you, Samantha J. Williams, why do you want to be a Common Pleas Court judge? Third question, why should we vote for you? what are your qualifications? That's number 3. Number 4, if you do have impressive qualifications, so do many other candidates running for judge. Number 4 question will be, what distinguishes you from the others? I'm also going to ask her a difficult question for a judge to answer, so we'll see how she deals with this. I'm going to ask her, what role does race play in America's legal system? We can talk about critical race theory, which, by the way, critical race theory is not a public school thing. Critical race theory is a law school thing. It came out of the law school academy in the 1960s. And pretty much what the law professors were saying is that, hey, you don't look at a society and say it's racist simply because some of the people there are racist or some of the institutions there are racist. You look at a society and determine whether or not it's racist based on its laws. So its laws tell you whether or not it's racist. So I'm going to ask you, what role does race and critical race theory play in the judicial position? And finally, since this is TV Courtroom, as you know, in many courtroom proceedings, certainly in trials, at the end of the trial, you have an opportunity for a closing argument. So we're going to hear from Samantha J. Williams giving her closing argument. And as we get her lined up to be here on the show, that's the first part. So we're going to have her on from about 3:35, 3:36 until about 3:55. And then we're going to shift gears and we're going to get into what I call the Nat Turner Law School. You might say, well, what is the Nat Turner Law School? Well, keep your dial locked here and you'll see and hear exactly what the Nat Turner Law School is. By the way, those who want more information about the Nat Turner Law School, all you have to do is email me. And you email me at, by the way, you can see me drinking from my Cheney University class of 1982. I love this cup because it's Cheney. You see all the Cheney stuff I have behind me. I love Cheney because it made me everything I am today. And coming up in a couple of weeks, it's going to be the anniversary of Cheney's founding, which is in February back in 1837, but more about that later. So today's agenda, and we're about to get judicial candidate Samantha J. Williams up, and you can see and hear her. And believe me, after you see and hear Samantha J. Williams, you're going to be as impressed with her as I am. That's the first segment of today's show. And the second segment of today's show is what I just mentioned, Nat Turner Law School. You might say, well, why did you call it the Nat Turner Law School? Because for me, Nat Turner is one of the most important figures in American history. You notice I didn't say African American history. I said American history. He stands shoulder to shoulder, and I would say above people like Patrick Henry. Give me liberty and give me death, man. Give me liberty or give me death. Patrick Henry. He talked about doing what had to be done for American liberty. You got Thomas Jefferson, who basically wrote the Declaration of Independence, talking about no taxation without representation. And then you got George Washington taking up arms against the British so that the 13 colonies could be free. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not a fan of Thomas Jefferson, horrific slave owner. Not a fan of George Washington, horrific slave owner. Patrick Henry, he's pretty cool. Give me liberty, give me death. My point is, when we talk about these so-called great American heroes, we have to include Nat Turner, because Nat Turner was the spark to the Civil War that brought about the 13th Amendment and our freedom. So that's why I call my law-based lectures the Nat Turner Law School. You can get more information about the Nat Turner Law School. By the way, the Nat Turner Law School is pro bono, which means free for the public, pro-Black, which means pro-us, pro-CRT, which means pro-critical race theory, and pro-liberation. For more information about the Nat Turner Law School, contact me at Michael Cord at natturnerlawschool.com. That's Michael Cord at natturnerlawschool.com. And you'll find out everything you need to know. And as I said, we will have our guest, judicial candidate Samantha J. Williams. But before that, let me talk to you about the legal system here in Philadelphia, which is obviously part of the Commonwealth, which means it's part of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. This is how the system works in Philadelphia, which is part of the state system. First of all, let me explain something. There are 67 counties in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. 67 counties in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Philadelphia is one of those 67 counties. And Philadelphia's judicial system is somewhat different from the other 66. Philadelphia has judges who are elected as such on the lower level, municipal court. So if you have a misdemeanor case in Philadelphia, if you have a felony preliminary hearing in Philadelphia, you start off in the Philadelphia Municipal Court, where there are people who are real judges who previously were real lawyers. Now that's here in Philadelphia of those 67 counties. Well, what we'll do at this point, because I'm getting the cue from our thorough, and I do mean thorough producer Roland, instead of you hearing from me, because you hear from me all the time, instead of you looking at me, because you see me all the time, I want you to hear Samantha J. Williams. I want you to see Samantha J. Williams. And once you see and hear her, you'll be as impressed as I am. And before we hear from her, let me just say what I pointed out at the outset. I've been a criminal defense attorney for 30 years. I've never been as excited about a judicial candidate as I am about Samantha J. Williams. That's why in my Tribune column, I already strongly endorsed her because I want people to make sure they vote for her in the May primary. Now I'm reaching out to all the other candidates and inviting them to either come on my radio show or come on my TV show and say their piece. But without further ado, my good friend and hopefully yours, Samantha J. Williams. And by the way, if you know anything about city council, you obviously know about her. So let me just say hello, Samantha. How are you today?
Hi, I'm so good. And thank you for your kind words today and for your support in me. And I want to thank you. You talked about your 30 years in the legal community, and you spent those 30 years in our legal community paving the way so that someone like me could even think about what I'm doing right now. So I want to say thank you for all that you do for the Black legal community. It means a lot to us.
Kind words are more important than kind, sincere, and genuine. So I appreciate you saying that. Let's just jump right into it. I'm going to ask you the following questions. One, what does a court of common pleas judge do? Two, why do you want to be a court of common pleas judge? Three, what are your qualifications to become a common pleas court judge? Four, you might have great qualifications, but what distinguishes you from the other candidates? Number five, what role, if any, does race play in the legal system? And finally, since this is a TV courtroom and many courtroom proceedings, you have a closing argument at the end. So we'll give you that. So for the next 15, 20 minutes, folks are going to hear from you primarily. You're going to tell us, what does a court of common pleas judge do? You're going to tell us why you want to be one of those. You're going to tell us what are your qualifications. You're going to tell us what distinguishes you. You're going to tell us whether race does or does not play a role in the system. And finally, you're going to have a 3 or 4 minute closing argument. So Samantha, I'm going to turn it over to you. For those who don't know, what is a common pleas court judge and what does a common pleas court judge do?
Thank you for your first question. And this was something that you were getting into explaining, and I'm glad that I get the opportunity to pick that up. So the Court of Common Pleas here in Philadelphia is both civil cases. So it's civil cases where the amount in question is over $12,000. Criminal cases that are felonies, so criminal trials for felony charges, as well as family court, as Attorney Michael Cord mentioned in the beginning. So judges who sit in the Court of Common Pleas oversee all of these issues, and that's from beginning to the end. So I'm talking about motions, ruling on motions, whether a case can even go forward in the court, whether certain evidence can be heard in a case. They're overseeing the actual issues of the case, ruling on evidentiary objections and challenges. They're making decisions in the case. So in a criminal case, whether an individual before them is guilty or not guilty. In a criminal case, after they make their ruling, whether that individual is sentenced to jail time or probation, they're deciding the sentencing in those cases. They're also overseeing probation at times. If someone is sentenced to probation by a court of common pleas judge, that judge will then oversee that probation term until it is finished. And then they are also handling other post-sentencing matters and also managing their caseload that's coming through the courts. And just so you know, I'm running for the Court of Common Pleas, but I'm not running for a specific assignment. My background is in criminal law, and I hope to be assigned to criminal, but I could be assigned to civil or family court as well, and I'd be happy to serve in any capacity if elected.
You know, I have to my left Malcolm, and every time I'm doing radio and TV, Malcolm whispers to me what he always wants me to know when I'm talking to the public on my radio courtroom show or TV courtroom show. He says, I don't want to hear that highfalutin legal jargon. Make it plain. That's Malcolm's mantra. Make it plain. So he's obviously whispering to you because based on your answer to the first question, you made it plain. Now folks have some idea. My second question is, why do you want to be one of those common pleas court judges?
So I want to be a judge because I care about the future of this city. And I know that it's very critical that those people who are sitting up on the bench making decisions should have some idea about what the people who are coming before them have lived through and gone through. And you can't do that if you're someone who's not a part of our everyday communities, which I am. And so I know this is not the part where I explain everything about myself, but I'm going to explain because it's a big part of my decision and my story that I am born, raised, still living in West Philly. I've been here my whole life. I went to public school. I very much understand the issues that my community is facing and the communities that are facing across the city. When I go into courtrooms and when I have been in courtrooms as an attorney, I see how there's a disconnect, right? I see how we have judges who came here for law school or came here for a job. They didn't grow up here. They didn't get their education here. They're not living in real neighborhoods. I live in Mantua. So they're not living in real neighborhoods in our city. And they don't understand what it's like for the people who are in front of them. And when you don't understand what it's like for the people who are in front of you, it calls into question then what is fairness? Because fairness can only be fair based on who is seeing it, right? If we have judges that don't know what it's like to be a part of the city for real, if we have judges that are scared of the people that are on the other side of the bench from them because they don't interact with individuals in our communities, then we can never have real fairness. And so a part of my work since I began my legal career was public service. I'm dedicated to this city. I've only worked for this city my entire legal career. And as an extension of my public service, it has always been a duty of me to make sure that our systems are fair and that they're efficient. And from what I've seen in our courtrooms, the lack of diversity on our bench causes a lack of fairness in our system, or it aids in the lack of fairness in our system. And so I deeply care that everybody who lives in the city, who works in the city, deserves a certain dignity and respect and chance in court, and I'm going to give that if elected.
Very well said so far, Your Honor, if you don't mind me calling you that. You kind of touched on my third question, your qualifications. Now, I know your qualifications, and we have like 15 more minutes in the segment. If you told the public all your qualifications, we'd be here for about 3-4 hours. So tell us, what makes you, and I'd say not only eminently qualified, but preeminently qualified. Tell us what your qualifications are.
Thank you. And so I want to break my qualifications down into 3 sections. One is my trial experience. Second is my proven track record on addressing issues affecting the community. And third is my commitment to the city. And I don't need to go too much into the third because I've already said I've been here my whole life. I'm staying here my whole life. I live in a real community out in Mantua. I've been raised in West Philly, educated in our system, stayed here to go to college and get my legal degree. So I'm going to touch on my legal experience and then my proven track record. In terms of my legal experience, I've been a lawyer in the city for the past 9 years. And like I said, I dedicated my career to public service. I started at the district attorney's office, where I served as an assistant district attorney in the trial division. And in that role, I had the opportunity to try hundreds of criminal cases on behalf of the Commonwealth of this state, representing or advocating for victims of crime. In that role, though, I gained a lot of trial experience, obviously, and you're going to hear from other attorneys who are running for judge, and we all have trial experience, and we're all qualified attorneys. But I took away from that experience the want to address what I was seeing happening in those courtrooms. I've had situations where I was a prosecutor, where I was given a case and truly believed that the individual charged was the wrong person charged, and been told to proceed with the case. That is something that is completely and entirely wrong, and something that I wanted to address. I'm talking about issues of bail disparity that I was seeing in our systems, that people charged for the entirely same crime, a white person getting a different bail versus a black person getting a different bail. So while I originally engaged in the district attorney's office as a way to gain trial experience and help my city, I quickly realized that I needed to do something different to change the criminal justice system. And it wasn't going to happen with me working in the courtroom in that capacity. So I had the opportunity to leave the DA's office and go over to Philadelphia City Council. They were looking for an attorney that had criminal justice experience, which I obviously did through years at the district attorney's office. And they were looking for someone who wanted to specifically be able to address criminal justice reform issues, which I did based on the things that I was experiencing. So when I got to my position, I actually oversaw many committees in City Council, but the three most important were the Committee on Public Safety, the Committee on Criminal Justice Reform, and the Committee on Legislative Oversight, which is our committee in council that oversees courtroom operations. So in that role, I actually got to work directly with the leaders of our criminal justice agencies. So I'm working directly with the president judges of the First Judicial District that oversee the courts. I'm working directly with our district attorneys. I've worked directly with Seth Williams and Larry Krasser. I've worked directly with our chief defenders, Keir Bradford Gray and Keisha Hudson. I've worked together with our police commissioners, Commissioner Ross and Commissioner Outlaw, on a variety of projects that were affecting, or issues that were affecting our system, some of the very issues that I spoke about, one of them being bail reform. As someone who was a DA and assigned to, in many cases, arguing what bail should be when someone is arrested and charged, one thing that I saw is that bail is not necessarily being used as it was ever intended to be used in this city. Bail is to secure an individual's appearance in court, and it should be revoked outright if that's the only means that you could secure public safety, is to hold the individual in custody. What's happening here, though, as many people who are probably tuned in know, that the majority of people who are in custody in our prison system are individuals who simply don't have means to make bails. They're not on serious charges. They just cannot afford to pay the bail. But the larger actors, the people that, we should be concerned about public safety issues, they're able to pay bail and they're able to get out, and that's not what the system intended. So one of my first acts when I joined Philadelphia City Council, to actually take the council members and our criminal justice agency leaders down to DC. Now, DC has not used cash bail in over 20 years. And DC has, in terms of crime rates and murder rates, they're doing a little bit better than Philadelphia. And so it was a test in trying to show our leaders that bail is not necessarily producing public safety here in our city. We're still having public safety issues here in our city, and we're still using the same system, but other cities have moved away from that system and have actually been able to improve public safety in the city. What DC does is you either get bail or you don't. And if you're not getting bail, you're getting released. And if you do have concerns about the individual being released, there's other means that you can provide to ensure public safety. That being maybe weekly check-ins with the court system, monitoring, house arrest, services that they can go to address the immediate needs that might have caused whatever issue brought them to the court. I've also worked on probation reform and sentencing reform, which is something that has become more highlighted in recent years, specifically after the issues that Mr. Meek Mills went through in the court system. That was happening every day. I'm glad that it was brought to light because he's a celebrity and he was able to have others advocate very vocally on his behalf. That's something that was happening every day. And so one of the things that I did is work with the council members on some studies and reviewing information about best practices on probation. And the best practices actually show that if someone does not reoffend within 3 years, that they're never likely to reoffend ever again. And so that probation sentences longer than 3 years are more harmful to the person sentenced to probation, because if you think about it, who amongst us could go 3 years, never making a single mistake, doing everything perfectly? It's unreasonable to think then that if you couldn't do it yourself, that someone else could. It's reasonable to think that someone should, for 7 to 10 years, take off of work every Friday to go visit a probation officer, have conditions put upon them that restrict them from working or leaving the state, as with what happened with Mr. Mills. So I really worked on opening the eyes of individuals as to things that were happening in the system. And I also was able to write laws in that role that were designed at making our systems fairer as well. Some of the laws that I put forth were improvements to our ban the box law, which, as many of you know or may think, only applies to job applications. And it's a big deal. And why is it a big deal? Is because ban the box laws are actually public safety measures. We can't have public safety if people don't have jobs. And when I mean jobs, I mean real, well-paying jobs. And previous convictions often act as a barrier to people getting those jobs, even if they have no correlation whatsoever to the task that the person is going to be doing. So we expanded that up. A part of my job was to monitor things that were happening in our system and keep pushing for further improvements. So when we got ban the box on job applications, we monitored what was happening after. And here's what was happening. People who had then gotten the jobs were getting disqualified for promotions over old convictions and records that had nothing to do with the promotion. So we changed that. So now in Philadelphia, current employees also have the same rights as people who are applying to jobs, that an employer cannot consider at the outset old criminal records when making employment decisions. And like I said, again, criminal justice reform is public safety. We need to keep being reminded that the two of those things are not mutually exclusive, and we need to have both of them in place and always be pushing for both of them. On another side, something that affects the civil functions of the courts, I wrote a law that provided good cause eviction protections to short-term tenants. Those are people with leases less than a year. What we were seeing happening is, because they were short-term tenants, they weren't getting any notice when their lease was ending that this was the final lease renewal and we would not be renewing. They were getting into situations where people who had lived in apartments for 10 years, 20 years, and their lease automatically at some point turned into month to month, were then being displaced from the only place that they knew as home. And I knew I had to fix that. So now we have good cause eviction protections, which gives tenants with specific leases a right of action in the Court of Common Pleas and also before the Fair Housing Commission. And I know I'm going on and on about my qualifications, and you told me not to do that, but I want to talk about one more law, Mike.
Well, let me just stop you there before you're going. I love the fact that you are highlighting your key qualifications. I know personally you got more than that, but you're hitting the key ones. So don't stop. I want you to continue. And then when you finish going through your qualifications, I'm going to throw you a curveball. Not really, but I didn't lay it out. I'm impressed with you. And I understand that there's a lot of other folks impressed in organizations. So when you finish laying out your qualifications, tell us who you've been endorsed by, so they don't think, yeah, it's that angry black guy, Michael Kors, but who else?
Okay.
So go ahead, finish your qualification, then tell us who's excited about you and who's endorsing you.
Okay, I wanted to talk more about not just the laws that I've written, but how I've been able to see issues and fix them almost immediately after. And so one of the things that I'm most proud of is the Citizens Police Oversight Commission. So I wrote that legislation. Actually, I wrote that legislation actually on my honeymoon. People think it's crazy when I say this, but it was so important to me that I had the laptop out by the pool and I was writing it as I went along.
So Samantha, you're not joking. You're serious.
I'm not joking. I'm serious. I was in Mexico, and,
wow.
It just needed to get done. It was one of those things where it was so important that it needed to get done. And so I got it done, and my husband forgives me. But I want to tell you why it was so important to me personally, because I'm a lawyer, obviously, and I know how the system works. But I actually was the victim of an illegal traffic stop a few years ago with one of my students from Temple Law. I won't get into the full details of the stop because we are awaiting arbitration currently. But I went through the process myself. So filing a complaint with the police department, getting interviewed by internal affairs, going to the internal trial where the judges were all cops and the attorney that was asking the question was a cop, and then the cop that did the traffic stop was there too. And I am one of less than 1% of people in this city who have ever filed a complaint against the police department and actually had disciplinary action taken against an officer. That officer was suspended for 2 days as a result of his actions during the traffic stop. And when I thought about what it was like when I went through that process, it was hard. So for someone who is a prosecutor, who's very skilled in what a traffic stop is supposed to be like, what the process is supposed to be like when you file a complaint, when you go to court, when you do a trial, that process was never, ever, ever, ever set up for anyone to have a fair chance, which is why only less than 1% of people who went through that process actually got some justice out of it. So what I did was, I didn't get mad. I didn't get angry. I used my knowledge to change it. The Citizens Police Oversight Commission now is an independent agency that can help and assist in investigating complaints against police. And this is why it's so important. Because even though I got I don't want to call it a good outcome in the case, but it was the outcome that should have happened. There was disciplinary action taken for a very wild break of the disciplinary code. But there was no independence in the process. I don't know how we could have ever expected that if a member of the community has an issue with the police, that they have to then go to the police to address that. I don't know in what sense of the imagination did we ever think that was going to result in a fair process. We can think about what it would be like for any other job when someone comes in front of you and you're to judge your peer over something bad that happens right to their face, right? Of course, it's not going to result in cops saying that cops did something wrong. It's an uncomfortable and awkward position for anyone to be in any profession, and that's why it needs to be independent. So the legislation that I wrote created an independent agency. They now have a seat on the judging board in those internal trials. So it's not just all police officers. There's actually a member of the community or a member of the Citizens Police Oversight Commission actually in those trials. They have a role in the charging of the officer when charges are brought, because previously only the police department was deciding what rules did the officer violate as a result of their actions. And also one very, very big thing that the law that I wrote changed, and that was the public reporting requirements. I did a lot of community town halls leading up to actually releasing the legislation that I wrote. And one thing that community members wanted to just know is, are the officers policing my community? Do they have complaints against them already? And that was something that wasn't transparent. The way that the department was keeping the information, you would never know that officer 2051 is the same officer 3617 that committed a similar offense or had a complaint filed against them. And you know why I know that? because I actually was contacted by a reporter after my traffic stop who informed me that the night before, a woman had filed a complaint against the same officer for a incident that was sexual in nature. I would have never known that. And so it gives me pause to think that if I was by myself in that car, if I wasn't with my male student, what would have happened then? And that is information that people deserve to know what's happening in their communities. And so there's a large public reporting requirement in the law. I'm going to wrap up my qualifications. I want to say I talked about my trial experience. I talked about my ability to write laws and my proven track record. Also, when I have the opportunity to, I serve as an adjunct in the National Trial Team Program at Temple Law, where I actually teach trial students or teach legal students trial skills, which is very important to me because when I was at counsel and writing laws, I still wanted to stay fresh with my trial skills and my abilities. So it gave me the opportunity to impart those skills on to others, but always remain sharp in my own skills. And I also serve on the Philadelphia chapter of the ACLU, the Barristers Association, which is our Black legal community here in the city. And also I am on the board of the Young Caribbean Professionals Network, where I help Caribbean immigrant students get connected to professional opportunities here in our country.
So, man, let me tell you how impressive you are. You are so impressive that I encourage you to continue with in on my time to do the second half of the show.
I know we're like way over time.
But you're on a roll. This is important stuff. The public normally votes for judicial candidates in the blind. So if you have to take an extra few more minutes, several minutes, so that they can open up their eyes, so you can open up your eyes, then let's do it. I did say that I want you to touch on race in connection with the system. You touched on it relative to bail, so we'll skip that for now, but we'll wrap it up with two issues I want you to address. One is the issue of the topic of endorsements. Who likes you? Who's impressed with you? You? And then finally, your closing argument. And that'll be 2-3 minutes of you just summarizing why you are one of the best candidates and why people should vote for you. So first, endorsements. Second, closing argument.
All right. Well, obviously you were a big major endorsement for me early on. But some of the individuals who have endorsed me are people who are directly knowledgeable of my work in the legal community and in writing laws in the legislative community. State Senator Vincent Hughes has endorsed my campaign. Councilmember Curtis Jones Jr. of the 4th District of Philadelphia has endorsed my campaign. Councilmember Jamie Gauthier of the 3rd District of Philadelphia has endorsed my campaign. Councilmember Cindy Bass of the 8th District of Philadelphia has endorsed my campaign. In terms of endorsements that are dropping next week, so you have early access to some endorsements that we're rolling out next week. State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta is endorsing my campaign. City Council Member Kendra Brooks from the Working Families Party is endorsing my campaign. So I have support that's in the Democratic Party, but also in the Working Family Party with Councilmember Brooks. And also by Monday, I should have a final decision, but the policy committee of the Democratic City Committee has voted to endorse me as a Democratic candidate for the Court of Common Pleas, which means that I will be endorsed by the Democratic Party for my race, which means a lot to me as a lifelong Democrat to have my party's endorsement. I'm sure I forgot some, but I will circle back.
And you know what's funny? I should have asked you who's not endorsing you. That would have been a shorter list. I'm just so glad that people who know what's going on are impressed, as I am, with your background and what we expect you to do when you are elected. Finally, in the next 2-3 minutes, I'm going to give you an opportunity for a closing argument. Anything you want to highlight, anything you want to repeat, anything you want to add, the microphone and the camera are yours for the next 3 minutes.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all the viewers who took the time to listen to me, because I know I went over time, but this is something that's really important to me. So I want to highlight that I hope that you consider voting for someone like me on May 16th, specifically because I have dedicated my legal career to public service, because the city means a lot to me. I want to give back to this city everything this city has given to me, starting from being a young girl in our public school systems, the effort and time that my teachers spent on me to make sure that I had the ability to do what I'm doing right now. I want to give back to the community. I want to give back to the community what my Temple professors gave to me, instilling in me that I could do something like this, lifting me up, spending extra hours studying with me, preparing me for the bar examination and all of the tests that I needed to take to get to this moment. I want to give that back to the community, to the community that I got to serve as an assistant district attorney when I was advocating for the victims of crime in courtrooms every day. I want to give that back to the community, to the people who allowed me to listen to them and talk to them about their issues, and then being able to correct those issues with laws, who trusted me to change their lives in that way. I want to give that back to the community. I am someone who is fully committed and invested to the future of Philadelphia. I'm not going anywhere. And I think that should be a question that we ask ourselves when we're voting for our judges. Are they from here? Did they stay here when they had the opportunity to leave? Because a lot of people do have the opportunity to leave the city when they start their careers. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to stay here. I'm someone that even after being, in bad situations, with an illegal traffic stop and having a gun pulled on me, said, I'm still committed to this city. We are going through a hard time in this city right now, but we need people to commit to staying and working together and fixing those things. So that brings me to my track record. As I discussed, I have a track record of addressing issues in our system, from bail reform, from evictions, from police oversight. That is me, someone that you can trust, that when there is an issue or a problem, I'm going to face it head on and I'm going to get it done. And finally, I just want to talk about the overall importance of electing judges that look like the members of our community. I'm going to be, I hope that I can have your support and that you vote for me on May 16th. But I'm also going to let you know that there are 10 positions open in the Court of Common Pleas and 2 positions open in municipal court. There are 2 other Black females who are running in the Court of Common Pleas, and there's a Black male that is running as an endorsed candidate in municipal court. And you need to elect all of us, because our courts need to be diversified in order for our community to have a fair chance in those courts. And again, you're going to hear me talk about the word fairness all across this election. When we talk about fairness, we're talking about from someone's vantage point. In this instance, from the judge's vantage point of what is fairness. If a judge has no connection to anyone who looks like you or I, or doesn't live in a community to be able to act or interact with anyone that looks like you or I, then what is fairness going to be when someone like you or I comes before them? This is something that Attorney Court touched on. Does race have an impact in our system? Absolutely. Does economics have an impact in our system? Absolutely. Does gender have an impact in our system? Absolutely. And that's why continuing to diversify our bench will lead to real justice in our courtrooms if we have real judges who are committed to having that. And I am one of those individuals. So again, I would hope that you would consider voting Williams for Philly Judge on May 16th. I do not have a button number yet, but as soon as I do, I will be letting you know. For more information about me or my campaign, you can visit my website. It's williamsforphillyjudge.com. If you want to email me, my email address is samantha@williamsforphillyjudge.com. And I can't thank you enough for listening to me. I was really, tired when I joined this show, and now I'm so energized and happy to talk about the issues. And I can't thank you enough for having me on today, Michael.
My pleasure. 2 quick things. One, would you repeat your contact information, that website and that email address? Please repeat that.
Absolutely. So my website is williamsforphillyjudge.com. And then my email address is samantha@williamsforphillyjudge.com.
I got to tell you, Samantha, correction, Your Honor. If I were a person of the jury and heard that closing argument, I'd give you whatever you wanted, because it was compelling and persuasive. And by the way, in fairness to the other candidates, if there is any other person, or if the viewers and listeners know of any other person running for judge and they want an opportunity to do what Samantha J. Williams did, just reach out to me at michaelcordx@gmail.com, michaelcordx@gmail.com. And by the way, tune in to my radio courtroom show, because periodically I'll be having guests on and people like Samantha running for judge and other positions. So big shout out to Samantha J. Williams. It was an honor having her here on the show. And I got to tell you, I'm usually pretty pessimistic about the state of the legal system in America, in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia. But every now and then there's a bright spot. And that bright spot for us in Philly is Samantha J. Williams. Samantha, thank you very much. And by the way, those of you who want to watch today's show or watch it later, you can check us out on Xfinity channels 66 and 966. That's Infinity channels 66 and 966, depending upon where you live. Also, FiOS channels 29 and 30. FiOS channels 29 and 30. And you can watch it anytime, all the time, repeatedly, on demand at phillycam.org. That's phillycam, C-A-M, phillycam.org. And obviously, we were streaming live on Facebook. Thank you all for tuning in to that segment. And it was supposed to be 15, 20 minutes, but Samantha J. Williams is so thorough, and the issue of judges is so important, we had to provide extra time. So thank you, Samantha, for spending time with us, and thank you for enlightening community. And again, those who are running for judge or know people running for judge, if you want an opportunity to be on my show, simply reach out to me at michaelcordx@gmail.com. Folks, we have about 10 minutes left, and I'm going to switch up a little bit. I was originally planning to talk about the Tyre Nichols case, but not so much about what those 5 thugs in blue did to him. I want to talk about the legal process. What's going to happen now? Now that there's been a grand jury indictment, now that there's been an arrest procedurally, what happens in Tennessee to these 5 cops who committed one of the worst murders I've ever seen in my life or heard about in my life? Those of you who have not seen the video, do not watch it. It's repulsive. It's revolting. It's sadistic. It's brutal. It's savage. It's sickening. If you've seen Hollywood movies of police brutality, trust me, they pale in comparison to what these cops did to Tyre Nichols. So what I was planning to do is to talk about the legal system in Tennessee so that you know what happens up to and even after the trial. I'm not going to do that specifically. What I'll do is tell folks who's interested in that to read my article in the Philadelphia Tribune. It's in the Sunday Philadelphia Tribune, but it'll be available online after 7 p.m. this evening. Just go to phillytrib.com. That's phillytrib.com. Type in Cord, C-O-A-R-D. Type in Tyre, T-Y-R-E, and the article will come up. Also, tune into my radio courtroom show at WURD 900 AM and WURD 96.1 FM. That's on every Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m. So in our final 8 minutes or so, because soon to be the Honorable Judge Samantha J. Williams was talking about municipal court in Philadelphia, common police court in Philadelphia. Let me walk through how the process works. And I'm going to focus specifically in the next 6 minutes or so on the criminal side, because as Samantha Williams explained, there's the civil side of the court system and the criminal side. The civil side deals primarily with lawsuits. You want to sue somebody for hitting you with their car. You want to sue somebody for breaching a contract, those kind of things. It usually, but not always, involves monetary issues. Let's put that to the side for now. Maybe we can get to it in future episodes. Let me focus now on the criminal side for the next 5 minutes. And here's how it goes. First, a person is arrested, which means they're detained and they're taken into custody. That's the first thing. Could happen on the street, at work, at home, wherever, you get arrested. The second step in the process is you're taken to the police station. And once you're taken to the police station, a number of things can happen. The first thing that happens is the police report written by the officers goes to the district attorney's charging unit. And now you got lawyers looking at what the cops did. And based on what the cops write up in the report, the lawyers in the DA's charging unit, they will write the charges. For example, the cop might say the suspect grabbed somebody's briefcase, punched the person, and then ran away. Okay, so the lawyers in the charging would say, okay, grab the briefcase, that's robbery, that's theft, that's receiving stolen property. Punch the person, that's either simple assault or it's aggravated assault, possibly reckless endangerment. And if the person who's suspected did it with somebody else, there'd be a conspiracy charge. So remember, first you get arrested, then you get taken to the police station. The charging unit decides what charges to file against you. The other thing that happens at the police station is that you could be interrogated. If you don't remember anything else I said in this 10-minute segment, remember this. Don't ever, I repeat, don't ever make a statement to the police. You've seen those shows on TV where the cops arrest people, and this is the first thing they say, or should say. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. Stop right there. If a cop just told you that anything you say can and will be used against you, why would you say anything? Don't say, I didn't shoot the guy, but I was in the bar when he was shot. Now you put yourself at the scene of the crime. If you say, well, yeah, Steve was a troublemaker and that's why he got shot. Well, now you know who got shot and you know it was Steve. So the best way to deal with a situation when you're arrested, when they say you have the right to remain silent, exercise that right. So let me back up. We've got to wrap this up in 4 minutes. First, you get arrested, which means detained, placed in custody. Second step in the process, you're taken down to the police station. And at that police station, you're basically processed. The DA's office charging unit gets involved. They decide which charge to file against you. Also, during that time, you could be interrogated. That's the fourth step. Don't say anything except, I want to talk to my lawyer. It never helps you. Never, ever, 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 ever helps you. And it always hurts you when you make a statement. So never do it under any circumstance. That's the third step, interrogation. The fourth step is where the court system gets involved. The fourth step is what we lawyers call a preliminary arraignment. And a preliminary arraignment is basically where three things happen. One, it's not a judge who presides at that point. It's what they call a bail commissioner, who sometimes might be a lawyer, might not. And what does the bail commissioner do at those preliminary arraignments? One, the bail commissioner will tell you what your charges are. Two, the bail commissioner will set bail if it's a bailable offense. And three, the bail commissioner will schedule a preliminary hearing. That's what happens, and that's always done by closed circuit TV. The suspect is in a police station. There's a closed circuit TV situation set up. The bail commissioner will be in the basement of the Stout Justice Center at 13th and Velbert, and it goes that way. Remember, that's the fourth step in the process. After that, there's something called a preliminary hearing. And by the way, I'm assuming that the person is charged with in this example I gave you was robbery, but any felony, because if they're only charged with misdemeanors, let's say shoplifting from a department store, well, that's a misdemeanor. That takes another route. We'll talk about that in future episodes. Right now, we're assuming a felony. Felonies are when you have preliminary hearings. People say, but what's the purpose of a preliminary hearing? Very simple. The only purpose of a preliminary hearing, the only purpose is for the judge to decide, does the case go to trial or does the case not go to trial? By the way, another thing I need to throw in, you know that there was a grand jury proceeding in the Tyree Nichols case in Tennessee. There's also grand jury proceedings in Pennsylvania and pretty much every place else. We're not talking about that. Instead of a grand jury proceeding resulting in an indictment, we're looking at a preliminary hearing. And remember, preliminary hearings are designed to determine if a case goes to trial. People say to me, well, Michael Cord, attorney Michael Cord, how does the judge make that decision? It's very simple. The judge at a preliminary hearing is only concerned about the answer to two questions. One, is there any evidence that a crime was committed? Not strong evidence, not overwhelming evidence, not evidence beyond a reasonable doubt, but is there any evidence that a crime was committed. Second question, is there any evidence that this defendant did it? Well, when I say any evidence, I mean just that, not strong, not overwhelming, but any. So go back to the first question. Is there any evidence that a crime was committed? Well, Joe Blow gets on the stand and says, I was robbed, I was shot, I was punched, I was stabbed, whatever. Once that person under oath says that, that's any evidence of a crime. Second question, sir, ma'am, or whoever, you say you were robbed or shot or stabbed. Do you see the person in the courtroom who did it? Yeah, that guy right there, Joe Blow. Okay, at this point now, the case is going to be held for trial because there is presented, in this case, any evidence of a crime and any evidence that somebody did it. Now, when I say the held for court, that means it's going to be a trial. The question is, what kind of trial? On what charges? What do I mean by that? Let's say that the arguments made by the defense attorney reduce it, say, from a robbery as a first-degree felony down to a second-degree felony or third degree. Let's say one crime could either be charged as a felony or a misdemeanor. Whatever legal arguments to show, one, that the elements of the crime were not properly presented, because a robbery is based on certain things that have to happen for it to be a robbery. Theft, certain things or elements have to be involved before it's a theft. Aggravated assault, whatever the crime might be, you can't just say I was a victim of that crime. The DA has to prove the elements of that. When I say prove, I mean based on sufficient allegation at the preliminary hearing. So now the judge has decided whether or not the case is going to go to trial. In this case, the judge has decided, but some charges might be dismissed, or the grading of certain crimes might be decreased. Either way, before the judge finishes at that point, the attorney, if that attorney is smart, will ask for a bail reduction, assuming the client was not able to make bail following the preliminary arraignment. That's the preliminary hearing I just mentioned. From the preliminary hearing, you have something called the formal arraignment. That's pretty much where you make sure that you have all the stuff you need, the police reports, the witness statements, the medical records, the charges. Once you have all that stuff, and technically you're supposed to enter a plea of guilty or not guilty, that doesn't happen in Philadelphia. It doesn't really happen anywhere, even though the rules pretty much say it. Pretty much a formal arraignment is when you begin to get all the documentation you need prior to trial. After formal arraignment, there's something called a pretrial conference, and it's just that, a pretrial conference. If there are any outstanding issues that need to be resolved before the trial, it's done at that pretrial conference. Following the pretrial conference is the scheduling conference, and it's just that. You schedule a trial date. You want a judge trial or a jury trial? Is the defense attorney available in 3 months? Is the prosecutor available? Once you get all that resolved, the scheduling conference is done. The next thing is the best thing, the trial. And trials are not based on whether or not a person did the crime. Trials are based on whether or not the prosecution can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. I got to tell you, folks, with all humility, that's it for me in terms of how the process works, because for many lawyers, they go to sentencing, but sentencing assumes you were found guilty. I don't know much about that because fortunately, many of my clients, can I say most, are found not guilty. That's pretty much a joke because I can say that they all were found not guilty, or most. A lot of times they're plea bargain deals and whatever. But having said that, I've said enough about the process. Remember, check out phillytrib.com. Big shout out to Samantha J. Williams. Again, those who might be running for judge and know people, if you want to be on the show, just contact me at michaelcourtx@gmail.com. I'm going to end today's show like I end every show, and it goes like this. Think Black, I'm out.